The elevator doors slid open with a soft ding. Fluorescent light flickered above as steam clung to the janitor's collar. His mop bucket rolled beside him, wheels squeaking in rhythm with the hum of the building. He stepped inside. She was already there, a little girl, maybe 8 or 9, wearing a pale blue uniform and clutching a leather sketchbook to her chest. Her knees knocked slightly. Her eyes flicked up, then away. He gave a polite nod and moved to the far corner. Silence. The elevator trembled mid-floor, just for a second. A hiccup in the cables. The lights dimmed briefly. Her breath hitched. "You okay?" he asked gently. No answer. Her small hand tightened on the sketchbook. "That used to scare my daughter too," he said after a moment. "Every time we'd get stuck, she thought the elevator was holding its breath." The girl looked at him sideways, still silent, curious now. "So I told her," he continued with a slow smile. "We were just in a spaceship. Waiting to take off, the lights flickered again. Her eyes darted upward. 3, 2, 1, he whispered. Liftoff. A tiny laugh escaped her lips. Just one, but it stayed in the air between them. The elevator resumed its climb. He leaned against his mop handle. She adjusted her sketchbook, then turned and peeked at him again, studying the crease near his eye, the paint splatter on his boot, the worn patch on his shirt. When the doors opened, she paused. "Your daughter. Does she still take the spaceship?" He hesitated. "Not anymore." Her brows lowered. Thoughtful Dot. Then she stepped out into the hallway. He stayed inside, alone, until the doors closed again and the bucket squeak echoed back into silence. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon polish and old silence. He pushed the mop forward, rows of light gliding across the marble floor like shallow waves. Every step left it gleaming. Every step erased itself behind him. He didn't hum, not tonight. Instead, he reached the end of the corridor and unlocked the janitor's closet. Metal shelves, a crooked chair, his little corner of the world. He pulled out the weathered tin box he kept behind the bleach bottles, hands careful, as if touching something sacred inside. A folded sheet of paper, a child's drawing, lines crooked, colors wild. A man holding a balloon, a little girl with tangled hair and butterfly wings. Daddy and me. He sat slowly, resting elbows on knees. The paper trembled slightly in his hand. "You were 6 when you drew this," he murmured, eyes soft. "You said the wings meant we could fly away whenever we wanted." The sound of distant laughter from an upper floor cut through the quiet. Probably a holiday party. Probably people who didn't know what it meant to miss bedtime stories or custody hearings or visitation schedules. Disappeared when lawyers stopped answering. Calls. His thumb traced the edge of the paper. She used to wait at the window when he came to visit. Always barefoot. Always holding that sketchbook. Until the waiting stopped, he tucked the drawing back into the box, closed the lid, and stood slowly. Just then, in his mind, he saw her again, the girl in the elevator. Same sketchbook. Same quiet, same eyes. Same eyes. His mop, dipped into the bucket, ripples spreading out like tiny echoes. And as he dragged it down the hallway again, the floor behind him shimmered like memory trying to stay alive. Rain kissed the lobby windows the next morning. He stood beside the mop bucket again, head low, cap tilted forward. The city outside moved fast, heels clicking, suits blurring, coffee cups steaming past the glass. Then she appeared, same sketchbook clutched to her chest. Ponytail, a little crooked, socks mismatched, the elevator pinged. She stepped in, he hesitated, then followed. The doors slid shut. This time, no tremble. Just silence. She stared ahead. Then sideways. "You work here?" She asked softly. "I clean here." "Oh." Pause. "I hate this place," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "It's big, and everyone's loud." He glanced at her. Loud, in their heads. Like they're pretending, and I don't know what I'm supposed to pretend. He smiled gently. "Maybe you don't have to." She looked at him again, slower this time, studying his eyes like they held a secret. "I drew something," she offered. She opened her sketchbook, flipping past crayon storms and watercolored faces. A butterfly, big wings, soft lines, gentle purple curves. "Do you like butterflies?" he asked. She nodded. "They don't yell, they just land." He looked at the drawing. His throat tightened. "Can I show you something?" she said. Sure. She tore the page out carefully, held it out to him. He didn't take it. Not at first. Just stared at it like it was something he'd seen long ago, drifting in a dream. Then he reached for it. Thanks, he whispered, as the doors opened. She stepped out again, leaving only the faint scent of shampoo and silence. He stood holding the butterfly in his hand, barely breathing. The memory of another girl brushing against the edge of his heart. He was polishing the brass railings near the west stairwell when the call came through his walkie. Head to HR now? He blinked, wiped his hands on a rag, walked the quiet halls like a man entering court without a lawyer. Inside the office, the HR supervisor didn't look up from her keyboard. We received a complaint, she began flatly, his brow furrowed, about interacting with a minor in the building, talking in the elevator. Giving her something, he frowned. She gave me a drawing, which you accepted. He shifted, uneasy. It wasn't Mr. Leon, she interrupted, folding her hands. You are here to clean, not make friends. Her eyes flicked down his file. You've been quiet. No incidents. But this building hosts executives, their families, clients. That girl is the daughter of someone important. He felt something tighten in his ribs. She talked to me first, he said. Still, Bembridge. She slid a memo across the desk. Sign it, or we'll escalate. His fingers hovered over the paper. A simple warning, but it felt like something else, a quiet threat. Pressed in corporate font, he signed. On the way out, he passed the front desk. Something new on the bulletin board. Memo, welcome to our new CEO, Richard Lyell. A printed photo. Sharp suit, firm jaw, silver tie. Beside him, in the picture, the girl, half smiling, holding the same leather sketchbook. Butterfly his chest, sank she. Wasn't just a child, she was the boss's. Child and he had just been marked, as he turned. Back toward the service elevator, the mop bucket bumped a wall. The slosh echoed louder than it should have, like the sound of something starting to slip beneath the surface. The executive floor was quieter than the rest. Carpet softened every footstep. The air smelled like cologne and confidence. He wasn't supposed to be here, but the marble floors didn't mop themselves. Head down, he worked in slow, practiced circles, always careful to avoid the glass-walled offices. Never make eye contact. Never linger. Still, he saw her, through the tinted wall, seated on a leather couch, legs swinging gently. Sketchbook open on her lap. She looked smaller here, out of place, and then the door opened. The man stepped out, gray suit, cold presence. Richard Lyell, the new CEO, the girl's father. The janitor's grip tightened around the mop handle. He straightened without thinking, instinct honed by years of needing to make himself invisible. Their eyes didn't meet. Richard passed him without a glance. Not a flicker of recognition, but the girl. She looked up, right at him, quiet, unsure. She gave a tiny wave. Not much, just 2 fingers, lifted slightly. He didn't wave back. Just blinked, she noticed. Before the door closed behind her, she tilted the sketchbook toward the glass, revealing a fresh butterfly, this one red. And then she was gone. He stood there a moment too long enough for someone in a suit to walk past and frown at him. He returned to his mop. But the floor shimmered now, just slightly. Like it wasn't the only thing trying to stay polished in a world that looked straight through you. Back in the service hallway, he opened his locker. The original butterfly sketch was folded neatly inside. Now there were 2, and somehow, they felt like chapters in a story that had just remembered it was still being written. The storage room was always dim, one flickering bulb. Dust in the air like forgotten snowfall, shelves of old chairs, unused signage, cables twisted like sleeping vines, and at the far end, something unexpected. A piano, upright wooden, scuffed edges. Keys yellowed by time, he found it while searching for fresh mop pads. The shape pulled him in like a memory whispered from a dream. He reached out, brushed the cover, and lifted it. The silence deepened. He sat, fingers hovered, trembling. Then one note, then another dot, soft, careful, like opening a wound. He didn't think. He remembered. A lullaby he used to play when his daughter couldn't sleep. Back when her world was small and his heart was whole, the melody was slow. Like every note was afraid to be too loud in a room that had forgotten music. His calloused fingers stumbled at first, but soon, The song poured out of him. Somewhere between grief and grace, a quiet cascade of sound that didn't ask for permission. He played until the bulb stopped flickering, until the dust stopped moving. And when he lifted his hands from the keys, the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like someone had listened. He closed the lid gently, as if tucking in a child. Behind the wall, a hallway light clicked off. Small feet tiptoed away, the girl retreating into the elevator. Her sketchbook pressed tight to her chest. Her eyes wide, she didn't breathe until the doors closed, and neither did he. Morning crept in soft and silver. He returned to the storage room. Drawn like a tide pulling toward shore, the piano was waiting. He hesitated before lifting the lid, half expecting the moment to feel less magical in daylight. But when his fingers touched the keys, the song found him again. Not perfect. Not polished, but honest. He played slowly, eyes closed, leaning into memory. When he finished, something caught his eye. A folded paper sat on the piano. Benched beside him, he hadn't left it there. It was thick, clean, the kind children fold. When trying very hard to be serious, he opened it. One sentence, scrawled in crooked, hopeful handwriting. Please keep playing. His chest ached in the best and worst way. He looked toward the door. No one. He stepped into the hallway. Still no one, but on the wall above the piano, something new had been installed. A small camera, barely noticeable. It blinked once. He stared at it. The hallway lights buzzed faintly, almost like a warning. He didn't smile, not this time. He folded the note carefully, like it was a page from a chapter he wasn't sure he was allowed to read. Then he walked away, slower than usual, as if the walls might shift behind him, as if something unseen had already begun, watching what he played and waiting. To decide if it mattered, they were waiting. Arrived 2 men in suits by the service entrance. One wore a visitor badge. The other didn't need one. Richard Lyell, the CEO. The piano, Richard said flatly. Explain. The janitor's heart tightened. I found it in storage and decided it was yours. No, sir. He swallowed. It was late. I didn't think anyone would. You didn't think. Richard stepped closer. The weight in his voice didn't rise. It lowered, like stones sinking in water. My daughter has been sneaking down, leaving notes. Watching you, he paused. She doesn't talk to most adults, and she's talking to a janitor. The word stung. I never approached her, the janitor replied. She spoke to me. Exactly, Richard snapped. You're not a teacher. You're not vetted. You're not even supposed to be on that floor. The silence stretched behind the CEO. One of the men pulled out a clipboard. A form already waiting suspension. He said, no trial, no voice, just a line drawn in policy ink. The janitor didn't argue. He just looked at Richard once, not defiant, not afraid, just tired. I didn't ask her for anything, he said quietly, but I gave her a melody, and I'm giving you an exit. They turned away. The janitor remained frozen. By the end of the hour, his locker was emptied. His badge disabled as he pushed the mop bucket one last time through the loading dock. The only sound that followed him was the slow roll of wheels, and in his pocket, the folded butterfly sketch. Crinkled now, like it, too, had been held a little too tightly by someone who knew what it felt like to be misunderstood. His name was removed from the cleaning. His ID card no longer worked, but her voice still echoed in the glass halls. I don't understand, she said. Standing at her father's office door, arms crossed, sketchbook pressed tight. You suspended him. Richard sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. You're a child, Emma. You don't see the full picture. She stepped in, quiet but fierce. I see enough. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He was kind. He listened. He was in a restricted area. He played the piano. That's all. Richard looked up. His daughter's eyes, always so guarded, were now sharp with something new defiance. He played the stomp Mom used to hum, she whispered. That stopped him. She opened the sketchbook, flipping past pages till she landed on the butterfly drawing. The first one, I gave him this. Because I liked him. Because he saw me. Silence, heavy. Personal. Richard leaned back. He saw you. She nodded. He didn't ask who my father was. He didn't talk down to me. He just played music and let me feel okay. Richard exhaled. Not irritation, not command, regret. He opened his laptop, pulled up the employee records, name, Leon, Gabriel, status. Suspended, he clicked on the file. Eyes narrowed. Then he clicked again. Buried deep pen, old note. A reference, former music instructor, New Orleans Conservatory. Specializes in classical improvisation. Richard stared at the screen, then at his daughter. She waited not for an apology for him to understand, and maybe to change something. He scrolled further. A video link titled, Duet with My Daughter. He clicked. The screen turned black, a father and a little girl at a piano, and Richard couldn't look away. The video loaded slowly. First, a soft frame, a sunlit living room, a dusty upright piano. Then Gabriel, younger, in a flannel shirt, laughing. His daughter sat beside him, legs dangling from the bench, her small fingers pressing hesitant keys. They played together. Not flawlessly, but beautifully. She missed a note. He nodded like it was perfect. He missed one too on purpose, and they both laughed. Richard sat frozen in his chair. He didn't notice Emma, inch closer, watching over his shoulder. That's his daughter. He asked quietly. Emma nodded. She moved away. Her mom took her in the video. Gabriel's eyes sparkled. A man whole in that moment. Unaware how quickly things could be taken, Richard clicked through more entries in the file. Gabriel, Leon, 12 years teaching classical music, Carnegie-endorsed youth coach, custody revoked during a messy divorce, took cleaning jobs after relocation. One line in a performance. Review stopped him. He teaches like he's trying to give his heart away before it breaks again. Richard leaned back in his chair. The words, heavy. He's not just a janitor, Emma said. No, Richard admitted, voice low. He's a father. A long pause settled between them. Emma glanced toward the window. So, can you fix it? Richard didn't answer right away. He simply stood and stared at the screen, the final frame of the video frozen. Gabriel holding his daughter's hand as they bowed. The image held, like a question neither. Father was ready to answer, but both needed to. Richard reached for his phone and dialed. The phone rang. Twice, Gabriel stood outside a hardware store, clutching a brown paper bag of cleaning gloves and duct tape. He hadn't expected anyone to call, not since the suspension. He hesitated, then answered, Gabriel Leon. Yes, this is Richard Lyall, CEO of Halworth Holdings. Silence. I've reviewed your file, Richard said carefully, and I believe there's been a misjudgment. Gabriel's grip on the bag tightened. You fired me before asking a single question. I know, Richard said. I saw the video. More silence. Richard continued. My daughter spoke about you. About the music. The butterflies. The way you listened. Gabriel closed his eyes. She reminds me of my daughter. She said the same about you. Wind blew through the receiver. Gabriel looked down at his calloused hands. So why are you calling? I'd like to offer your position back, with full pay and an apology. Gabriel looked across the street. A father was tying his son's shoelace on the curb. The boy laughed. The father smiled, steady and warm. Thank you. But no, Richard blinked on the other end. No. Gabriel's voice was soft. I gave that job everything I had left, but music's the only thing that still gives something back. He hung up gently. But before he could slip the phone in his pocket, he heard footsteps. Mr. Gabriel. He turned. Emma stood on the sidewalk, hair damp from the drizzle, sketchbook clutched to her chest. She looked up at him like she'd walked miles to find him. I have a recital coming up, she said shyly. Would you come? The bag of gloves slipped a little in his hand. And he nodded. Not just because she asked, but because something inside him had been waiting for that invitation all along. Sat in the quiet cafe on the corner. No suits, no titles, just two fathers. Richard stirred his coffee, but didn't drink. Gabriel kept his hands folded, eyes watching the steam rise like memory. She never talked to her teachers. Richard finally said, Shoe Drew, hid behind it. Gabriel gave a small nod. It's safer to speak in colors. Richard chuckled, dry. You said no to coming back. I didn't say no to her, Gabriel replied. Richard glanced down. You lost custody. Gabriel didn't flinch. I lost everything, except the music. Silence fell again. Not cold. Just real. I used to teach, Gabriel added, voice low. Hundreds of kids. Then my daughter, she was different. She listened without fear, played without shame. He paused, and when she left, I didn't touch a piano for years. Richard looked out the window, not to death, to distance. Too many meetings, too many closed doors. Emma stayed quiet ever since. Their eyes met. I was a father in name, Richard said, but you're still playing for yours. Gabriel nodded. Every note is a prayer she might hear. Richard leaned forward. I don't want her growing up thinking silence is strength. Gabriel smiled faintly. Then let her hear softness from someone who knows how to hold it. Richard pulled something from his coat, an official envelope. I've started a community music program. In the building, outreach, after hours. He slid it across the table. I want you to lead it. Gabriel looked down. One line sealed the offer. Instructor, creative arts and piano therapy. He didn't speak, but the way his fingers touched the paper. It was like someone had placed a piano key back into his palm, and it finally fit. The piano had been moved, no longer buried in storage. Now polished, tuned and waiting in the sunlit atrium of the building's lower floor. Emma sat on the bench, legs swinging gently, hair tucked behind her ears. Sketchbook rested closed beside her. Gabriel pulled the stool closer. He didn't wear a janitor's uniform anymore. Just a soft shirt, sleeves rolled, eyes clear. Ever played before? He asked. Emma shook her head. Just listened. That's enough, he smiled. Music's not about knowing, it's about remembering. She placed her fingers on the keys, uncertain. He placed his beside hers. Start with C. She pressed the note. It rang out shy but warm. Now G. Her other hand fumbled. He guided gently. No pressure, he whispered. Just let your hands speak. Together, they found a pattern. A soft melody. Her shoulders relaxed. Her eyes focused. He added a harmony beneath hers. Subtle, steady, and the air shifted. Executives passed the glass, walls, and slowed their steps. Assistants peeked in from around corners. Even Richard stood in the hallway, arms crossed, not interrupting just watching. And for the first time, his daughter didn't shrink. She leaned in, smiling. Can we try again? She asked. Gabriel nodded. All day. They played not perfectly, but honestly, one note at a time, building something neither of them could name. But both could feel like a bridge rising between two hearts that had been stranded for too long. In the hallway, Richard exhaled slowly. Not a sigh, a release. And as he turned to leave, he glanced back once more, just in time to catch his daughter laughing mid-note. It wasn't loud, but it was music, and that, finally, was enough. The school project was simple. Write about someone who changed your life. Emma sat at her desk, pencil between her fingers, sketchbook opened beside her. She didn't start with a name. She started with a sound. He played a melody like someone remembering something too important to forget. She wrote about how she used to hide in elevators, drawing butterflies that never flew, about how her father talked through silence, and how a janitor spoke through music. She didn't choose between them. She wrote about both. My dad built buildings. The other built bridges I didn't know I needed. One brought me here. The other showed me how to stay. Later, at the building's atrium, Gabriel arrived early. The piano was empty. The sun painted long shadows across the polished floor. On the bench, a printed program for the upcoming recital. His name was on it, not at the bottom, not in small font. Instructor, Gabriel Leon, piano mentor, and ensemble coachee, touched the paper gently, as if afraid it might disappear. The letters shimmered under the light, more real than any paycheck he'd ever received. Then he turned the page. Inside, a folded essay. Emma single quotes. He read it slowly. Every line, a note of grace. By the last sentence, his eyes were wet. Some dads leave, some stay. I'm lucky I got both. One taught me to be strong. The other taught me it's okay to feel. He closed the essay. And looked up, outside the glass doors. Emma ran toward the building, her father walking behind her, not leading, not correcting. Just following. Together. Gabriel smiled. The recital hadn't begun yet, but the music, it was already playing. The atrium had never held this much silence. Rows of folding chairs, parents in quiet anticipation, suits unbuttoned. Phones, silence dot at the center. A single piano under soft light. Emma walked onto the stage. Sketchbook still tucked under her arm. Her shoes echoed softly on the marble floor. She sat at the bench, took a breath, and opened her sketchbook, tucking the butterfly page onto the stand like a talisman. Gabriel stood in the corner, behind the curtains, watching, waiting. Her fingers hovered above the keys. She played the first note, shaky, soft, searching. Then another. The melody stumbled, but she kept going. The audience leaned in. Gabriel stepped forward. Emma saw him. She paused mid-phrase. The room tensed. Then, in a moment unscripted, unspoken, she scooted sideways. Made space, invited him with nothing but a glance. Gabriel walked onto the stage. Not as a janitor, not as a guest, but as her partner. He sat beside her. Nodded once. Together, they picked up the melody. This time, it danced. He followed her rhythm. She trusted his harmony. And as the final chord rang out, there was no applause. Not at first, just stillness, as if the audience needed a second to breathe. Again, then thunder. Applause shook the walls. Some stood. Some wiped their eyes. Richard, near the front, didn't clap right away. He just looked at his daughter, radiant. Then at GabrielGrounded.com, and he clapped the hardest of them all backstage. Emma leaned her head on Gabriel's shoulder. You didn't miss a note, she whispered. Neither did you, he smiled. But both knew. That performance had nothing to do with music. It was the sound of two broken wings, learning how to fly together. The elevator, DINGE, midday light poured through the building's glass atrium. Casting gold across the floor, Gabriel stood beside the piano, stacking sheet music from that morning's lesson. Chalk notes from other children still smudged the board behind him. Mr. G's Song Rocks. And can we play the butterfly one? He smiled quietly. The building wasn't silent anymore. It hummed with music, with children. With second chances, the elevator doors slid open behind him. Footsteps padded across the floor. He turned. Emma stood there, sketchbook in hand, her ponytail swaying. Beside her, another little girl, younger, curious, holding her father's hand. The man wore a name badge, a new hire. The girl pointed up at Gabriel. Is he the music man? Emma beamed. That's Mr. Gabriel. He teaches here now. The girl looked at him shyly, then reached into her small backpack. She pulled out a folded paper and handed it to him. A butterfly, wobbly wings, purple crayon, smiling face in the middle. Gabriel knelt for me. He asked. She nodded. He looked at Emma. She smiled, the kind of smile that said, everything had found its place. He tucked the new butterfly next to the first one, still folded in his coat pocket. Worn soft from being carried too long, the elevator behind them stayed open a moment longer. He held the door as the man and his daughter stepped in, just before the doors closed. The girl waved and whispered, "Bye, music man." Gabriel stood still, then turned toward the piano. The light hit the keys just right, and as he sat down once more, his fingers found a melody that sounded like memory and hope, and every goodbye that turned into something more. Something with wings.